during our last video, we got the truck running. Depending on sequence, you may see something about the valve covers already, or you may not until after this. But before we go out and do our first test drive with this around the block, we don't even have it registered yet, but we're going to take it around the block. We absolutely have to change this steering coupler. It's steered enough to get us up on the trailer, but after we got it here, started digging through, cleaning, looking at it a little bit closer, it was very apparent that we absolutely have to change this thing before we can take it out on the road. So if you're not familiar with these, so there's a piece of rubber, like a rubber disc, that goes all the way around. And there's bolts on this side that come from the steering shaft, and bolts on this side that come from the steering gear, which is this big box down here, because this has manual steering on it. And so you see a little bit of this white stuff left here, and if you look over on this side, you see some white stuff. Well, that white stuff's actually supposed to be a full disc that comes all the way through here where my finger is and connect those two white pieces, which obviously it's not there. And if I stick my finger down here and mess around with this a little bit, it just flakes off and falls off. So that has completely deteriorated since this truck was put back together, and we have to change that. The only thing really keeping us able to steer at all is these pegs that stick up, and they catch on this metal plate, and that's basically your safety, kind of fail-safe, that gives you some kind of steering when this type of catastrophic failure happens. So we ordered that, got it coming in. We'll pick it up tomorrow, but we're gonna go ahead and get the disassembly part of this done, and we'll be ready for it. So that'll be the last thing that we need to do after we finish up with the valve covers, and we'll take this thing out on its first drive. So hopefully you're looking forward to that as much as we are, but we'll take it out and see what's going on after we get this done. So for now, we'll spare you some of the grunting and knuckle busting trying to get some of these old rusty bolts loose, but we've got to undo. There's a bolt here, there's one on the other side, and then two additional ones. So we'll get all those done. Based on what I think we got to do is also undo this bolt, which is like this collar that holds the steering shaft. And then I think we also have to undo two bolts under the dash inside. I'm not sure about that, but really what we're trying to do is get all these bolts loose down here, loosen this coupler little bracket off, and then what we're going to try to do is pull the steering shaft back up into the cab and give us the clearance we need to be able to get this off.
This is how we're getting these, I don't know what these bolts are. These top ones right here, we got screwdriver in so it doesn't twist, and 1/2-inch wrench. We have a ratcheting little wrench, but that's set up for these top bolts. After taking that bolt off, you got kind of hard to see, the hands in the way, but
Whoops.
the white rubber piece and the piece of metal below it is what came off. But you got 3 of those to do. You can see now the one behind it, kinda. Still see that one there. And that's the stuff that comes off. And you got that metal bit with the bolt, your little washer, and a nut. That's all your metal pieces. And then
Yeah, those are not rubber at all. They're just
they just fall apart.
They crumble like a cookie.
So we took out the 2, whatever those bolts were, the ones I showed right before. So that third one that I thought was, or what I thought was a third one, you kind of see back there. Can you move the light?
Where?
To point. So now you can see a little better right there. That white right there. There. I thought that was a third one, but it's the same as this one here on this side, just with a little bit of plastic left. But this is our kind of trash pile. because the thing we bought comes with all the metal bits that we just took off. But those pieces and all that stuff is together, but only 2 of those. Now we're onto this little thing on top. Using a socket for that, whatever size that is. But
That is a 9/16.
9/16 socket.
But the 3/8 drive ratchet didn't give me enough torque, so I'm going to upgrade to the 1/2 inch. So we had those 2 bolts off. I just loosened this bolt, which I had to get the 1/2 inch drive to get it because it was really kind of stubborn, and we're out of WD-40, of course. But this is now loose, so you can see that moves. So that should loosen the pressure on the steering column and allow it to be pulled back up into the cab a little bit and give us the room we're going to need to be able to get these pieces off. So go ahead and give it a pull and see if it moves for you.
Go pull?
Yeah. Okay, I see it wiggling some. It doesn't want to move though. I mean, I can see it.
I need like a helmet. I feel like I'm gonna hit my head.
Well, don't do that. Okay, I can see it moving a little bit. So hold on, let's pause. We'll undo that 1 bolt inside underneath the dash, and then we'll see if it moves.
So after pulling on a little bit and it wasn't doing much, coming down here to take this. I don't know if you see that, sorry. This whole thing my hand's on. This is the whole steering shaft or whatever it's called. Column. So, taking this thing off. On this side, there's no bolt right there. But on that side, you see that bolt. Taking that one off, see if that lets us pull on a little better.
That looked like that worked, yeah. So we did that 1 bolt, and then when he pulled it this time, it definitely came up. So that's good. Is it staying there? Or?
Yeah.
Okay. So hopefully we got enough clearance, but if not, we'll pull it some more once we get the new piece. But we're going to go ahead now. We've got to disconnect this bolt, which is a 12-point bolt, and then we have to pull all this lower piece off here, off the steering gear, and then that's where the new piece will bolt on there, and then it'll bolt back through this plate. So that bolt right there, and then we'll be done with the removal part. Well, I had to call in more horsepower and use a 1/2 inch ratchet again to break this loose. We're definitely putting WD-40 on the shopping list for tomorrow, but I was able to get it, so we'll finish loosening this, and then we should be able to get this piece off. Okay, so that's loose enough. It'll slide off the steering gear, but we can't get it out yet. We're going to need a little more room. So we'll try to pull the steering shaft up just a little bit more. And if that doesn't work, then we may have to take this bolt off here and see if that helps, but I don't want to do that. So hopefully we can just pull this up enough to get the clearance we need to get this off of the shaft and be good.
We couldn't film us actually doing this because I was inside and my dad was wrenching on it, but that's the piece we took out there. And you had to loosen that bolt up.
So I loosened this bolt right here. I had to put a socket on one side, a wrench on the other one in order to get it loose, but you can see it's loose. When it did that, it let this part of the steering shaft, this plate, go up into the steering shaft now. So there used to be a pretty good gap between this bolt and this flange. But as you can see, it all got sucked up, and when he was pulling on it, it was up even further, which gave the clearance to get these prongs, or whatever they're called, enough clearance to get out of here. So when we get the new one, we'll come in here, and we'll probably get a two-man operation again, but he'll pull up on that. We'll slide the new one in here, back onto this this gear right here, which comes out of the steering gear. We'll clean some of this stuff off too. Try to get some degreaser and stuff on here, scrub this a little bit while we're in here messing with it. But the new one will slide back on here. These prongs will go into these kind of half circles here on this plate, and there's one on the back side too. And then the two bolts go through there, the bolt here, which tightens it up on this piece up on here. We'll shove everything back down, get our gaps where they look good. Everything's bolted good, and then we'll retighten this bolt, retighten this bolt, and we'll retighten the bolt up underneath the dash, and then try to find another bolt to put under the dash that's supposed to be there. But that'll be it.
This is the new steering coupler that just got. Looks, that's what it was supposed to look like in the car. See a full circle round. We pretty much just had those metal pieces and a little bit of, I guess, rubber or plastic, whatever material that is, under the metal bits.
Okay, so when he went inside and pulled back on the steering wheel and pulled it back towards him, that gave me enough room to get the coupler between this spline and this plate up here. So I did that while he had the steering wheel straight, put the two bolts in and got it started so everything's aligned, and then had him drop it down so that we got this on the spline, everything lined up and on the spline with the steering wheel straight inside. So that's the key thing, is get the steering wheel straight. Then put these bolts in, get it attached to the steering column itself, and then lower it down onto the spline with your tires straight and your steering wheel straight, and that should get your steering pretty close to being aligned. Once we got the coupler started on the steering gear spline, I was being a little bit stubborn, so I sprayed a little bit of WD-40 on the spline, and then I did the barbarian deal and kind of whacked this metal piece right here. Not the rubber bolts, because that doesn't help, but this metal prong. I tapped it a few times with the handle of the ratchet, and that seemed to kind of get it started. I went inside and kind of pushed on it, gave it a couple of bumps from inside, and so now we got this thing to where it'll move up and down and go all the way down, but we don't want it down here touching, because then that's going to grind on things. So we're going to leave, I don't know, 1/8 of an inch or something like that, and get that set about right there, which I'm holding with my hand, because otherwise it pops back up. And then we're going to tighten down this screw or nut. So I tightened up that bolt on the spline, got that really nice and snug. So now I'm moving on to these bolts on the coupler part itself up here. Just a couple 1/2-inch wrenches. It's got a lock washer on that nut, so you gotta hold it in place or else the whole thing spins. But we're gonna go ahead and tighten this down and get this nice and snug. Do the one on the other side the same way, and then move on to re-securing the steering column itself. All right, like I talked about, we loosened that bolt underneath the dash, pulled the steering column back up until it met the steering wheel, and retightened the bolt inside. We retightened that outer collar bolt, and now we have to loosen this the little collar there that he's got the 2 wrenches on. So that holds some of the internals up into the steering column.
If
Yeah,
you can
so
see
there's
that moving.
Yeah.
There's a white piece above that.
Right, there's a white thing. So we're gonna slide the thing, that brace up as far up the shaft as we can, and then start tightening it again. Now he got done tightening that. So if you look in here, now you can see there's a gap below that. So this looks more like where we started at the beginning of the video. It's going to look a little different because we actually have the coupler is fully there and providing thickness, whereas before it was fairly collapsed down. So it's a little bit different. Of course, you move everything, nothing goes back exactly in the right place or the same place, but I think this is going to work for us, and I'll show you inside what that looks like once we got that met back together. So before, there was a gap right here between this kind of silver cast piece and this black piece, and you could see the guts down inside of there. Now we pulled the outer column, the piece with the holly sticker on it, up to meet the steering wheel, and now it doesn't, I mean, it wiggles a little bit up and down, but definitely not like it was before. So we're going to say job done with the steering. Definitely feels a lot better than it did before, and looks like it'll work for our test drive. So that's all for the steering coupler replacement.